the family I remember. I remembered very clearly the clothes and goods of my previous family. From my earliest memories, I felt like an outsider, and that I must do whatever I could to find my real family.
Which means these memories are real to Delucci.
The day I died, I went to the stream to swim with a friend of mine. And then, somebody pushed me. I was in the water when I died.
When I was Grandpa Augie, I died in the hospital. When I went to heaven, God gave me a card. Everybody with a card like that is allowed to come back. I want it to come back.
The Ortega home in Colorado. Jim Tucker from the University of Virginia cannot just reject what little Gus has to say about a previous life.
There are certainly a lot of people who will simply dismiss this work because it disagrees too much with their assumptions about how the world works. But to dismiss something because it disagrees with your assumptions is really not very scientific. So we have this phenomenon, and we have the evidence that it's involved with this phenomenon. So the scientific approach is to explore it and learn all we can about it.
The Ortega home in Colorado. Dr. Jim Tucker is interviewing Gus Ortega. Gus claims to have lived before as his grandfather.
And how about your grandmother?
Yeah.
And were you a little boy when you were doing that, or was that when you were big? That's when you were big?
Is Gus telling the truth? Tucker has no way of knowing. That is why the most crucial information in many cases come from the parents. Jim Tucker interviews Kathy and Ron Ortega. Standard procedure.
And when was the next time that he said something that suggested he had information, that he knew things about your dad?
Gus said, I had a sister, but she died. She's a fish now. And we said, she's a fish? What do you mean? What happened? And he said, well, some bad guys hurt her. And that really made me stop, because I only recently heard the whole facts of this story about my father's sister, and she indeed was murdered, and she was thrown into San Francisco Bay.
A family secret. Little Gus could never have heard about this story, because even Ron Ortega did not know about his father's sister. How could his son?
I really hadn't thought of reincarnation or even putting that word in connection with what was happening. I wasn't brought up, with learning about reincarnation. I was brought up Southern Baptist, and certainly did not hear about reincarnation.
If you had told me that a year ago, yeah, right. you've come back. But, now, anything can happen. Yeah, anything.
In his hotel room, Jim Tucker reviews his notes. There are many questions, especially when it comes to same family cases, like the Ortegas.
Whenever we investigate a case, we certainly have to assess the reliability of the informants. With this same family case, we always have the concern that the family members are grieving for the lost family member and therefore have the wish that the child would be returned.
Despite the possible weaknesses with cases like the Ortegas, there are still many questions that nobody seems to have convincing answers to.
Whether you accept the idea that this necessarily means reincarnation, which means a soul that moves from one body to the next, that's for each person to decide.
Professor Haraldson and his translator climbed the steep steps to one of Sri Lanka's most recognizable landmarks, the famous rock temple of Dambulla.
The next step in the investigation of this case leads us here to the Dambulla temple because Diluxi had spoken about it. And then the family, they decided to do something about Diluxi's talk. Diluxi's parents decided to call the abbot living in this temple and ask him if he knew of any girl who had died in this area and who fit the description given by Diluxi. In most of the countries where we find these cases, there is a belief in reincarnation.
If a culture principally allows for the concept of rebirth, does that make reports of previous lives more likely? May that be one of the reasons why the best cases can be found in places like Sri Lanka?
Here in Sri Lanka, we find most of the cases among Buddhist families. Of course, the majority of the population here is Buddhist, about two-thirds. But we also find some cases among Christians, and we even find a few among the Muslims. So the cases in Sri Lanka are found in all the major religious communities.
The key to solving Diluxi's case may very well lie with the abbot of the rock temple. Haraldson and his translator can count on the fact that here, their investigation will be taken seriously, because reincarnation is a common concept for a Buddhist monk.
Buddhism teaches us that reincarnation exists. It happens due to the accumulation of good and bad deeds, which we call karma. Our desire to live in this world pulls us into our next birth, and the number of good and bad deeds we have performed determine the circumstances of our next birth.
But in the case of Diluxi, the abbot is unable to help. He knows of no other family that matches Diluxi's memories. Instead, he refers the scientist to the local newspaper. A personal friend of the abbot's, a journalist, decided to investigate Diluxi's claims after speaking with the monk.
This is how the story continued. Mr. Apipala, he learned about the case. He went and interviewed Diluxi and the parents about what she had been saying about a previous life. It was then published a few days later. And this newspaper has a distribution all over the country.
For the journalist, it was a good story.
I consider this case unique because for over 30 years I've researched these types of stories and have come across various people who talked about their previous births. But this one is 1 in 1,000.
His readers were enthralled with Deluxi's mysterious memories and the remarkable details she remembered. But for now, one question remains unanswered. Will the scientists find a match to Deluxi's memories of an earlier life and death? A newspaper journalist had written an article about Deluxi's memories of a past life. The article mentioned that the girl thinks she used to live near the Dambula rock temple. Several weeks after the article was published, the mail arrives at the Nisanka home. When the postman handed Mr. Nisanka his mail that day, he was surprised to find one letter postmarked from Dambula. He had no friends or relatives in that part of the country. When he opened the letter, he was stunned.
I was very surprised to receive a letter by a Mr. Ranatunga. He lives in Dambula. I was stunned when I read that his little daughter had died just the way Deluxi had always talked about. He talked about the river and the footbridge. His little girl was called Shiromi.
Shiromi's father confirmed many of Deluxi's statements, and he said he would like to meet her.
I missed my previous parents very much, and I longed to see them again. After this letter, my second mother was finally convinced, and she agreed we would go and meet with them.
There was nothing her current parents could do. Deluxi was now determined to meet the people who she believed were her true family. If they would not take her to them, she threatened to run away. The letter finally convinced Deluxi's parents. They were going to take her to the place where she thinks she died. They took Deluxi on a 6-hour drive to Dambula. When they came closer to the city, Deluxi began to recognize landmarks. She even started to direct the driver toward the house where her previous family lived. Even today, after several meetings, it is still a moving reunion. For Professor Haraldson, a rare opportunity to witness what could be two lives intersecting.
This meeting is quite emotional. It's only about in a third of all cases in Sri Lanka that you were able to find a connection between what a child is saying and a previous family or a person who died that fits the description. This is very rare.
Professor Haraldson is astounded by the change in character as soon as Deluxi meets her previous family. She is less withdrawn and seems to fit in much more naturally with this family. Could she really be this little girl, reborn?
Shiromi was a very obedient girl who never left the house without informing us where she was going. She always left the house with her younger brother and her sister to swim or to play. And one day she just did not come back. I was so upset that Shiromi hadn't returned home that I ran about looking for her. When